Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison Lagrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. US President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, says that Russian President Putin is now open to a permanent peace deal with Ukraine, following last week's talks between Moscow and Washington. Turkey arrests 200 individuals in coordinated raids across 5 countries targeting drug and money laundering syndicates as part of President Erdogan's anti-crime agenda. Protesters block the state broadcaster's headquarters in Serbian capital Belgrade after accusing it of bias amid rising anger over a railway tragedy last year. Japan orders Alphabet-owned Google to stop forcing smartphone makers to pre-install its applications ahead of high-stakes trade negotiations between Tokyo and Washington later this week. And senior American and European diplomats gather in London to find a way to end the civil war in Sudan, which today enters its 3rd year. The conflict has left tens of thousands of people dead and over 13 million displaced. Hello and welcome. We begin with West Asia's Iraq, where a powerful sandstorm swept through central and southern regions of the country. Skies turned eerie orange with thick haze and reduced visibility across several cities, as Iraq faced its biggest sandstorm of the year. The visibility had dropped to less than a kilometer in several regions. The severe conditions also led to the temporary closure of airports in the southern provinces of Najaf and Basra. Local media reported power cuts in several regions. According to health officials, over 1,800 people reported respiratory issues on Monday, and the hospitals in Mutana province in southern Iraq reported at least 700 cases of suffocation. More than 250 people were also hospitalized in Najaf province. Now this after a huge cloud of dust spread across the entire province, adding to the catastrophic situation. At least 322 people, including children, reported to hospitals in Diwanaya province. Over 530 people also experienced breathing issues in Dikar and Basra provinces. Now, Iraq often witnesses blistering summer heat and frequent sandstorms. According to the United Nations, Iraq is one of the 5 nations most severely impacted by climate change. Police officials and pedestrians were seen wearing face masks to shield themselves from the suffocating cloud of dust. Meanwhile, the Environment Ministry has also warned the country that it could expect a rise in the number of dust days in the coming decades. The recent sandstorm brings back the painful memories of 2022, when 1 person had died and over 5,000 were treated in hospitals due to respiratory ailments. That year, too, a heavy sandstorm had severely affected the West Asian country. Climate change is severely affecting the whole world in one way or another. It's not just Iraq. Many countries are also facing its harsh impacts. A swift and effective solution is urgently required to address the deteriorating situation before it's too late. And shifting focus to the war in Ukraine, where the alleged Chinese involvement in Moscow's war effort is facing unprecedented scrutiny. Ukraine presented 2 Chinese nationals at a news conference in the capital. Kiev said that the men were captured while fighting alongside Russian forces in the Donetsk region. Ukraine claimed the Chinese individuals were taken into custody after receiving emergency medical aid and were now being held in compliance with international law for wartime prisoners. The two Chinese men, whose identities were concealed, told reporters through interpreters that they voluntarily joined the war after seeing recruitment ads on TikTok. One said he never intended to fight, but was sent to the front anyway. The other claimed that Russian recruiters deceived him and that he was trapped and constantly monitored. Now, both Chinese nationals now hope to be included in a future prisoner exchange and return to their families. But it remains unclear if or not they spoke under duress.
Today, investigators of the Security Service of Ukraine have already conducted the first interrogations, and we can state the fact that both citizens of the People's Republic of China joined the Russian armed forces by signing the relevant contracts.
Last week, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the capture of these Chinese individuals. Zelensky claimed that these men were among several hundred Chinese nationals currently fighting for Russia.
Last week, our soldiers captured the first Chinese citizens fighting on the front, fighting for Russia. As of now, we have information that at least several hundred Chinese nationals are fighting as part of Russia's occupation forces. This means Russia is clearly trying to prolong the war, even by using Chinese lives.
China continues to maintain a public position of non-involvement in the war. Responding to a question on Chinese nationals being paraded in a press conference in Kiev, Beijing said it was verifying the information and rejected what it called manipulation and hype around the capture of two of its nationals.
At present, China is verifying the relevant information and circumstances. With regard to the individual actions and consular cases involving Chinese citizens overseas, China handles them in accordance with the law.
While Beijing has provided significant diplomatic backing to Moscow since the invasion began in February of 2022, it did not officially sanction military support for Moscow's war effort. But the press conference in Kiev has raised serious questions about Russian wartime recruitment practices, information operations on social media, as well as the extent of Chinese involvement in the war. And as Kiev puts Chinese faces to a global audience, the question now looms, is this just the action of rogue individuals, or the first public glimpse of a much broader, undeclared involvement? Moving on, the world's most widely used digital map has just made a quiet update. The one that's resonating deeply with millions in the Philippines. As of the 14th of April, Google Maps now displays the West Philippine Sea as a maritime location, which was previously shown as the South China Sea. The change is now live both on Google Maps as well as Google Earth. The label appears prominently in waters west of the Philippine archipelago, while the South China Sea remains marked to the northwest, indicating the larger ocean body. The label West Philippine Sea was previously viewable only if one specifically searched for it, just like what happens in the case of user-generated location pins. But now the West Philippine Sea has been integrated into Google's global map data, meaning that you can view the Filipino maritime region simply by hovering around the country's territory on Google Maps. In a statement, the Filipino military called Google Map Update a recognition of the country's sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea also confirmed the development in a social media post, stating, and I quote, "For anyone wondering if you can search for the West Philippine Sea on Google, yes, you can." In the capital, Manila, senior lawmakers hailed the update as a victory for all Filipinos. Senate Majority Leader calling it an affirmation of the country's maritime zones under international law. Others called it a quote-unquote geopolitical affirmation of Manila's maritime claims. The Filipino House Speaker called the update Manila's symbolic and moral victory amid belligerent Chinese expansionism in the region. Now, the Google map revision obviously irked China. Reiterating its maritime claims, Beijing says that the region, even the one near the Philippines, remains recognized as the South China Sea. Now, under the Philippine Maritime Act 2024, Philippine Sea includes the Luzon Sea, the Calayan Island Group, as well as the Scarborough Shoal. Now, the area specifically refers to the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, waters crucial for Manila's food security, maritime defense, and energy resources. China claims nearly all of the West Philippine Sea, despite a 2016 international tribunal ruling which was denouncing these claims. As the Philippines, under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., continues Beijing's unilateral assertiveness in its waters, the latest Google Maps update is being seen as a valuable contribution to what Manila sees as the truthful representation of the region. In a fascinating turn of events in the world of cinema, Indonesia is proving to be a hotbed for a genre that chills and thrills in equal measure, and that is horror. Indonesia's homegrown ghost stories and monster tales are not just captivating local audiences. They're absolutely dominating the Indonesian box office and even starting to garner international attention. Our next report brings you the details.
Imagine the scene, the crunch of popcorn punctuated by screams. Well, that's the reality in Indonesian cinemas right now, where moviegoers are flocking to see locally produced horror films. This resurgence is built on a deep-seated cultural fascination with the supernatural, with tales passed down through generations to scare and, it seems, now to entertain on the big screen.
Indonesian movie is more to the supernatural things that happen in the country, right? Culturally and probably it's, as a myth and as a urban legend. So most of them are supernatural.
The numbers speak for themselves. According to the Indonesian Film Board, a staggering 60% of the 258 films made domestically last year were horror films. And these weren't just niche productions. They accounted for a massive 70% of all cinema tickets sold. That's over 54 million tickets. This booming horror movie scene marks a significant turnaround for Indonesia's film industry. Film production had drastically declined in the 1990s due to a lack of funding. In fact, only 37 horror films were made in that decade. But the new millennium brought a revival, culminating in a Guinness World Record for the film industry most focused on the horror genre.
They also get scared because you know the stories are so familiar with us because we heard about this kind of stories since we were a children. That's why it's very, very close to our culture, to our memory.
This renaissance, as some are calling it, was further fueled after the pandemic, with the massive success of the 2022 film KKN Desa Penari, which sold 10 million tickets. Based on a supposedly true story of supernatural encounters, it sparked a wave of more realistic, event-based horror films. The financial impact is also significant. Indonesian cinemas generated over $136 million in revenue in 2022, and experts predict continued growth. This resurgence even earned Indonesia a special spotlight at the prestigious Busan International Film Festival last year, highlighting the renaissance of Indonesian cinema. Beyond local myths, these films often incorporate religious themes, reflecting Indonesia's status as the world's most populous Muslim-majority nation. Some even feature passages from the Quran or are entirely inspired by Islamic narratives. And the appeal of these movies isn't just domestic. The rise of streaming services is helping these unique horror stories reach international audiences. Even smaller production houses are finding success exporting their films to neighboring countries, with negotiations underway for wider distribution. And experts believe this unique export is far from over.
Indonesian cinema can be accepted all over the world. I mean, it's starting at the moment, it's starting to rise at the moment. I mean, like, our movies are already wanted in Southeast Asia, in Asia, and some of them are traveling to the Western world. And yeah, we hope that our audience getting bigger and bigger.
The blend of exotic, unimaginable horror rooted in local culture is proving irresistible both at home and increasingly abroad. For audiences seeking the unknown, Indonesian horror films are delivering chills and thrills with a distinctly local flavor.
And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to Firstpost.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on First.